Okay, guys, welcome back to another episode of Overcome and Become. With me, as always, is my co-host Humberto Kaufman, and today we have a very special guest, the owner of Hammer Fitness and Man the F Up, Amer Kamra. How are you doing today, sir?
Good. Thank you for having me, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for joining us today, man. Honestly, having you on is a huge deal to us because your work speaks volumes. I think one of the biggest things that stands out to me was that I know you're a minimalist, so to speak, up until you just bought the G-Wagon. Congrats on that, by the way. But that minimalist lifestyle, I'm curious to ask, I've seen that you don't really believe in having a lot of luxurious, purchases, so to speak, over the course of your life. So what I'd like to know is more or less, what did it take for you to start your first business? What was required? What was the sacrifice?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think even to this day that it's like a battle of that minimalist mindset and trying to enjoy life at the same time. It's always a battle because there's a lot of things we don't need. There's a lot of things we don't need. There's a lot of things we don't need to do. So it's important that you understand why you're doing certain things, why you're buying certain things, like why you're giving attention to certain things in your life. When I was starting my business, obviously I didn't have much money, and for years, even building my business, I didn't have money to pay myself really. It was more, everything I was doing was going back into my business. It was going back into my learning. It was going back into my growth to be able to progress my business. So there's a lot of sacrifices that people need to make. And I think sometimes when people look at, entrepreneurs or business people, and especially with social media, it's a lot of flash, right? And we tend to want that lifestyle for the wrong reasons. Luckily for me, I started when those things didn't really exist, when there weren't like entrepreneurs working from the beach, driving nice cars. That wasn't really a trend at the time. But you really what business is, and when you're starting a business and when you're pursuing a business, you can't be giving your time and your money to those types of things. It needs to go back into, it's like a kid. It needs to go into the business. You need to nurture it in order for you to grow it. So, it was really, I didn't buy my first brand new car until I was 30 years old. I didn't have a brand new car until I was 30 years old. Every car I drove, and I've been in business on my own since I was 20 or 21 years old. So that is a testament to how much time I put into my business and how little I did for myself personally before I reach that point where I can buy anything.
So you were basically sacrificing the fun in your present for the future and the reward that it was going to reap, and the belief that you had that it was going to pay off.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like paying off your debt. If you have a $20,000 credit card debt, the only way you pay off that credit card debt is by sacrificing luxury or lifestyle today in order to pay that off tomorrow. And it works the same way, whether it's a debt or whether it's you trying to get ahead. You have to sacrifice what you're doing today. I wasn't taking vacations. I wasn't, going out. I wasn't doing any of those things. It was like literally everything was focused only on that. And now, luckily, that I'm in a position where I can have more fun, I still need to remind myself of it, because that's where a lot of people kind of get off. They reach a certain point and they kind of just tap out because they're like, oh, it's fun here, it's exciting. I can buy a nice car, or I can do nice things, or I can enjoy myself more. But that's where you really need to stay focused and stay grounded, which is a difficult thing because there's no reason why you need to sacrifice. You don't need to kill yourself and sacrifice. But the same thing that got you to where you are is the same values and morals and principles that you need to maintain in order for you to get a lot further. And I think that's why, as you climb higher and higher, there are fewer and fewer people reaching the top because it's, a lot more distraction, a lot more pleasure, a lot more deviation, a lot more temptation out there, right?
You know what? That's very interesting because I can totally relate that to my own bodybuilding experience and career. I found that when I first started bodybuilding, and I started right around 2004. At that point, I basically had nothing but the will to get to a certain point. So it's almost like my mentality was to a certain degree, a little bit more hardcore. And as I started to become a little bit more successful with my competitive history and even in business, I found that I got to a point in which that hardcore mentality started to subside a little bit. And I had to take a step back and almost self-analyze and look internally. What is it? Am I getting too comfortable, or so to speak, softer because I've gotten some of the things that I was looking for? And I don't know if you know of someone that has experienced something similar, or even yourself, but I completely agree with that. It's so important that you consistently review that mentality, whether it's changing, whether it is where it should be for that point in time that you are in. Perhaps you should go back and take yourself back to, that mindset that got you where you are in the first place, to see how much farther it can get you.
Yeah, I agree with that absolutely, man. I think I see it with even clients or athletes all the time, or even myself. It's almost like a trend or a cycle. People will, have a lot of success, and then the following year or the following cycle of whatever they're doing, it's like not as good. And then that motivates them to do better. It's like, shit, I'm not, they might not, let's say someone's doing a show, they might not look nearly as conditioned the next time, because you almost forget what it took to get to where you are. If you're dieting for a show, for example, you forget how hard you had to diet in order to get there. Like you remember the good things, but you don't necessarily remember how difficult it was, how much sacrifice you had to make. Like it's hard to put yourself in that headspace. So then let's say you don't look good the next time around, you're like, shit, I gotta get better. That wasn't good enough. Like you're disappointed in yourself, and that becomes the new motivation. In business, in entrepreneurship, it's kind of the same thing, to be quite honest with you. But I was very driven for many years also with that mindset and that mentality, which I found up to a certain point stopped working for me. It worked up until a certain point, and then it no longer worked for me, because I was almost like pushing myself from like a point of like fear, and pushing myself from a point of I don't have enough, and like I need to be better. And it's almost like I was pushing myself, or gaining the motivation and the desire to work hard from a point of like, I'm not happy with myself, or I'm not happy with who I am. And like, but that gets old after a while too. It's like you hear that same narrative over and over. And then I shifted eventually. I had to, like, we all function from our point of beliefs, right? And I had to, instead of like, let's say in business, I would always convince myself that, you're not good enough, you're poor, you don't have enough money, you need to be better, like all those sorts of things. I thought to myself, after many years, like, what if I were to like put myself in the position of like, you are good, or you are successful, and like you have been successful. How much better can you be? Like operate from a place of desire, not a place of fear. Operate from a place of growth, not a place of fear and scarcity. And when I started to think that way, I actually started to experience more success in my life, because I was making decisions that, like, I was running towards something instead of running away from something. So I was a lot more clear about my objectives, and that was a very, very difficult place for me to reach personally, because that's not what I was used to ever. And that mindset shift was the tipping point for me.
So I guess you could say that you switched from I'll believe it when I see it to I'll see it when I believe it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's even part, and truthfully, that's even part of buying a nice car, for example. It's like, I was always like, man, I want to get a nice car. I want to, maybe one day I will. No, I need to work harder before I earn it. And then I said, if I just get it, how much more successful will I think, being in it? How much more successful will I feel being in it? How will I view myself being in a nice car? And I did that, like 3 years ago, when I bought my first Mercedes. And when I did that, I was like, man, I actually leveled up in life. And whether you want to say that's stupid or it's nonsense, the reality is, like, I was driving a nicer car, and I started to think, well, like, I need to shave off the bullshit in my day. I needed to stop wasting time in my day. Like, I need to think more like a successful person. And how would a successful person think? So I started to feel that way. And then the same thing happened when I got this car. Like, it was a mindset shift and a mindset elevation. And it may be something as stupid as a car, or maybe something as stupid as anything, whatever it's your body, whether it's like, you need to get abs to feel that way. And if that's what makes you feel better and level up mentally and start thinking the way that person with the abs should think, or that person with the car should think, I think there's nothing wrong with it.
You know, it's funny because as silly as it may sound, what I can associate that with, and I don't know if you would agree, is like as simple as when you put on a nice suit. The moment you start wearing that, it's almost like you start acting the part. It does something to you in which you're almost getting into a different character, a more business oriented or a more, you know, leadership oriented. So I can completely agree and understand what you're saying, what you're saying specifically regarding this, whatever it is that you purchase, you start to act like once, instead of just believing that you're going to get there, you start to act as if you've already gotten there to see how much you can progress from that point instead of having something kind of holding you back in that regard.
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes is start with the end in mind. So like you think about the end, what does it look like? And then you work backwards from there. You know, because in order for you to get to a place you've never been, you have to know what it looks like. And how are you supposed to act in a way? Like, how am I supposed to think like a successful person? Or, you know, if you've been obese your whole life, how are you supposed to think like somebody that's in shape if you don't know what it's like to be there? You can't just, you know, all of a sudden, you know, flip the switch and start thinking like a successful person. You know, you don't get money then think like a successful person. You get money because you think like a successful person. You don't get a good body and then think like a person with a good body. You know, like you have to have that mindset before you achieve it. So you have to already be there mentally. And that's difficult because like that's almost like some degree of delusions, you know, and I'm sure you experience this in bodybuilding, you know, as did I for years that I did it. It's like you have to be in a somewhat of a delusional state in order for you to achieve things. And it works, you know, and sometimes it sounds weird if you're saying it out loud because other people are like, man, you're so out to lunch. But you need to believe it. You need to convince yourself of that narrative. You need to start like seeing your life that way in order for you to get there.
It's such an interesting concept, and I think it might be worth noting that it's also a matter of self-regulating, because in some cases that delusion may take you a little bit too away from reality, right? Like I can relate this to bodybuilding, for example. I am all for someone believing that they can go and get to where they want or need to get. But I think there's some cases, and this may have to do with your environment and support system, because if these people pump up your tires a little bit too much, in which you're starting to believe perhaps that you're a little bit ahead than where you currently are, that is also going to be detrimental potentially to your process, right, and your success.
Yeah, it's like a fine balance and a fine art between like being hard on yourself and believing in yourself, and like constantly going back and forth between the two, like talking to yourself in two different voices, you know. And that's hard because like one will be very destructive, which is the I'm not good enough mentality, and then the other one's just as destructive, which is the like I'm going to be an amazing pro and I'm going to be the best in the world mentality. You almost need like, it's like everything in life, there needs to be a balance of energies in order for it to be successful or whole or complete.
Do you
Here's the question.
Go ahead, Bart.
Sorry, I was going to say, here's a question though. Would you agree that in some cases it takes a catalyst of some kind to elevate someone's thinking in that manner though? Let's say someone's complacent as it is, or they're thinking in a way where like, oh, I can never reach this goal. Does it sometimes require a catalyst that in some cases could be traumatic to actually get them to change their mindset?
Yeah, I think at different points we experience different things or we need different things in our lives, you know. I mean, you know, there's a reason why a lot of bodybuilders, you know, start bodybuilding because of breakups, for example. You know, we hear that cliche and it's true for a reason. And the catalyst almost is a good thing. I was thinking about this yesterday. We built a gym, right? And I remember when we built we're building it, but when we were building the first one, I remember thinking to myself, like, what the fuck am I doing? Why am I doing this? You know, like I was I already had the lease, I already signed, I had the key, I was in the place. I'm like, what the fuck am I doing all this? First of all, what am I doing all this for? What am I even doing? I don't even know what I'm doing. And then I remember like that thought came to mind was like, you will figure everything out, but you have to dig yourself into a hole deep enough where you have the motivation or the desire to want to climb, you know. And eventually you work so hard or you climb so far or you push yourself, like your back's so much against the wall that like you have no choice but to figure something out in life. And then you're too deep in it, so now you just go with it and you just push yourself to the point where you're like, okay, this is going to be successful, I have no choice, you know. And you don't have an end limit, there's no upper limit for where you stop. So whether that's like voluntarily that you make that choice to, you know, sign a lease or, you know, enter a show or do whatever, or it's something happens in life and you're forced to, regardless, like external pressure, external circumstances do force us to level up. And, you know, I'm sure even I've had clients sometimes where they weren't necessarily getting the best results. And then I would say to them, you know, you're like, you know, 14 weeks out. And they're like, yeah, I didn't book the show yet. I'm like, that's probably why you're not getting great results, because you didn't book the show yet. You still leave that little room for like cutting corners. Like when you're fully committed to something and fully invested into something, it's not a matter of diet. It's not a matter of carbs. It's not a matter of cardio. It's literally a mindset shift. And you know you're all in, and you have no choice but to do it. You know, and I think whether that happens because you chose to, or whether that happens because life throws something at you, when you have no choice, you get much better results. So I often try to put myself in a situation where I have no choice, because then I have no choice but to figure it out or but to do it.
You know, that's very interesting. I was just telling Byron that I just started working with a client that at the gym, he was telling me, I'm thinking about, I'm going to do everything I can to do this show that we have in 14 weeks. Just right there, by the body language and what he was saying, even, it sounded like there was that option of not doing it. Like you haven't really fully committed, right? So he said, I kind of want to make the show in 14 weeks. Right there, the language that you're using and basically the position you're putting yourself in, that is just 1 foot in, it's just not going to work. And then he proceeded to tell me, okay, I'm going to do everything I can in the next 2 weeks to see if I can make it. Still not good enough. You still have ass in it there. So it wasn't until I guess he realized that, as you're saying, it isn't a matter of, you shouldn't allow yourself for that option B. Because if you do, then it's very easy, whether it's consciously, subconsciously, your actions are going to be aligned with this potential option of just not doing it. So now, Amer, do you have any clients or people that you work with that you would consider overthinkers? And if so, what advice do you normally give them when this overthinking starts to be detrimental to their success and progress?
Yeah, I think, you know, one thing I've learned over time when working with people is that as much as I'm the coach and it's, you know, my way, you also have to cater your coaching to certain personalities, you know, and we're all personalities to varying degrees. Someone that's an overthinker, I tend to want to give them more instructions and more of a blueprint, more of an outline of like what it looks like, because they're probably more, you know, a systematic type of person, and they need to have a plan. They need to know what it looks like. And we know contest prep is not necessarily a plan. Like I can't tell you what you're going to eat in 3 weeks from now, you know. I would love to, because then that would be less work for me on my end. I could just say, here you go, take it, go. And we know it's more work when you're coaching someone, like you're, you know, going through the process with them, making alterations based on what you see. So I tend to give that type of personality more of an outline of what the process is going to look like, because it's going to be healthier for them mentally, you know. And sometimes I forget that not everyone's like me. And I think we're all guilty of that. You know, we think like our way's the right way, and the way we think is the right way. And rightfully so, because I think, you know, you guys have proven success and I have proven success in some areas. So as a result of that, like you want people to adapt or adopt that mindset or that way of working or that way of thinking. But I always try to remind myself that this person needs something different. And that's a big part of coaching. It's like, what does this person need? You know, some people need to check in with me every day, and some people need to check in with me maybe once every 2 weeks in order, it's just too much for them mentally. So sure, I don't bend on my values or my beliefs, but I have to bend on making it accommodating in order for people to bring the best out of them.
Yeah, so that would be the definition of true personalized coaching. You're basically acting or providing instructions or instructing based on the personality, as you're mentioning. I've worked with clients that, you know, you take a look at them, you're like, oh, these people is going to do very well. They have a lot of potential, but they just don't see that. They're like, oh, I'm not good enough. I look like crap. You know, I'm too fat, too small, whatever. And so with those people, I've found that I have to almost like bring them up, so to speak. And then there's some other clients that they're a little bit too overconfident. They'll be like, you know what? No one's gonna touch me. I'm gonna get my pro card in this show. And they haven't even stepped on stage. So a little bit too far, buddy. Let's bring it back a little bit, because you need to back to reality almost, right? And it's not like you're trying to bring them down or just not have them have huge aspirations, but at the same time, we need to understand that you don't know who's going to show up, especially when it's an international pro qualifier. Someone can come from the other side of the world and it's completely blow everyone out of the water, right?
Yeah, I think
expectations.
It's all expectations, you know, setting expectations for people, you know, taking someone from where they are and like directing them to what the goal is, you know, and that's what coaches do. Is we're looking objectively from the outside, and you know, we're like, no, go left, go more right, except the left and the right are different words, you know, like we're saying like, oh, humble yourself, or you're not good enough, or you are good enough, or you know, eat more or eat less. Like that's all it is. But we're essentially just directing them and guiding them there, while trying to manage it from a personality standpoint. You know, like you know, as you said, someone thinks they're too good. You got to humble them. You got to bring them back down to reality. You got to smack them down a bit. You know,
yeah,
and
that's
back,
sometimes
right?
what it takes. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Amer, let's take it back to the very beginning a little bit. What I would like to know is, how did the entire bodybuilding process started for you? Like, what was it that originally got you interested in the sport and the industry and the process? And when was this too?
Yeah, sure. I was playing football. I was already in good shape from playing football. I wasn't, you know, in good shape before that, but it just kind of happened. You know, you're doing a lot of cardio, you're lifting weights. And then I was doing some fashion modeling stuff. And then I was getting a bit too muscular for that. And I thought, okay, I like this. Like, I like this whole process. I like being in shape. I like, you know, getting on a stage or doing whatever it is. And, you know, what are my options here? And at the time there was something called fitness modeling, and that's what I was doing, right? It was like, I was competing in something called Fame at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was competing against like guys like Ronaldo Gary, you know, like, you know,
Yep.
who he is, right? He's a pro.
Yep.
Like I was competing against guys like that because there was nothing else for me to do, you know. I was like 18 or 17 years old competing against guys like that, and they were massive. And you know, and I just kind of found my way, and then I stopped competing for a while, and then I started competing again when I was like 21, and did it for another 4.5 years. Before there was men's physique, it was something called WBFF. There was like pro fitness modeling, and I competed with that. And then when I was finishing, that's when they started coming out with IFBB men's physique, and they only had really, I think, bodybuilding, bikini, figure, and fitness at the time.
Yeah.
There was no classic, there was no men's physique, there was no wellness, there was no women's physique, there were none of those categories, right? So those came after. And then
so this was around 2012, no?
Yeah, I stopped in 2012. I stopped competing in 2012, and really I stopped because I was just noticing I was giving my attention to more things. You know, I was giving my attention more to business, and for me, it's a very difficult thing. I can't focus on two things at once. I can only do one thing, and I'm obsessed with it. And I if I'm dealing with you right now for something in business, I will annoy you, man. I just won't stop calling you. I won't stop messaging you until like it's done, you know. And then when it's done, I don't think about it ever again. So that's kind of how my life has been, and it's a double-edged sword. It's a catch-22, right? Like it helps me because it helps me progress in something and be hyper-focused. But at the same time, all other areas of my life, I kind of just forget about. It doesn't matter anymore.
Well, clearly that obsession, though, is what brings the success that you've had so far, right? Because you're so attentive to it. You're putting all your effort and time into it until basically the goal is accomplished, right? I'm curious, Amer, was it the coaching that was your first business, essentially? Did that come directly after competing?
Yeah. It just happened organically. It just kind of transitioned into it like many of us do. But I noticed like I said, I was just giving so much to my clients that I thought, like, when I was competing, I literally couldn't even train maybe two people. That was like my max. I was like, 3 weeks before a show, I'm like, nah, I'm done. I'm not training anyone anymore. You know, like
Yeah.
my mind, when I couldn't wait for shows to be done, not because I wanted to eat, not because I didn't like the training. It was just like my mind needed to relax because all I thought about was the show that I was doing or whatever I was, the goal was at the time. Right. So I just found myself personally, I was giving a lot of time to it. Right. And but while I was giving all that time to it, my mind wanted to do a lot of other things. I was 24 at the time, and I really wanted to do a lot of other things. I wanted to pursue business. I wanted to put a lot into it. So it was just like a natural transition. I never thought about competing ever again since then.
Interesting. When you work with different levels of clients, let's say first-time competitor being one level, pro qualifying, and professionals, do you have a different approach that you use to each one of these different types of clients? Or do you try to get, let's say, the newbies as close to the intensity or approach that you would for a guy or a person in pro qualifying stage or even professional stage?
Yeah, that's a very good question because I think, it's a question that reflects how much I've changed over the years too, right? I mean, like at one point you kind of try different things and I think with a lot of things in life, you always circle back to what's authentic to you. Like you kind of change yourself over the course of life. You're like, oh, maybe this works, or maybe that's the best, or maybe, I should act more like this. And it kind of happens naturally. I don't think we think about it too much. Like I never thought maybe it should be nicer, maybe it should be harder. But what I found worked for me is just being myself, and honestly, just being honest with people. I think in earlier years I was honest, but like unnecessarily rude and unnecessarily an asshole. Whereas like I'm just honest now, but I know how to be honest in a respectful way, and I think that's what I learned. And that honesty comes with confidence, and that comes with maturity. But I say more confidence. Often we say things in a rude way when it's the truth because like it's an easier way for us to communicate it. Like it's hard to be nice and honest at the same time. So it's like easier to be like, you fucking suck,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
with maturity and confidence, you kind of, how to communicate with people and articulate yourself better, and communicate your message so that people understand it. So my approach is kind of the same in how I communicate with people. My expectation of a person is the same always. Like you have to give 100. Is no room for like anything less. But what I expect the person to look like in the end, obviously, is going to be relative to what they're capable of at that given time.
Yeah, I guess what would be key noting here is that 100% could mean different for different people, depending on the stages that they are, but it's still the expectation and the bare minimum that you're expecting from every single one of these people. And it's also important to know what you mentioned. There's a difference between being rude and being completely honest. There's ways of going, because I know some people that pride themselves perhaps as being completely honest, but they are perhaps a little bit more rude than it's warranted or necessary. So it's that important distinction. It's there's a fine line, if you will. Like there's and at the same time, I think some people, if they're not used to being talked to with the complete honesty and truth, you might be even super polite, but still keeping that message straight, and they may take offense because they're not used to people talking to them with honesty, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we're also dealing with people's bodies. It's like it's one thing if you're dealing with someone's, like something someone owns. Maybe you're fixing their couch, or whatever it is, and you're like, oh, the couch just like the material's garbage. Like it's different. But when you're talking about someone's body, obviously people have different attachments to their body. They have different psychological issues when it comes to their body, eating disorders and body dysmorphia and these types of things. So it can affect people differently, and they take things differently. So, one thing that's always led me in, I think for myself, because I do take a lot of things personally anyways when I'm coaching people, and I think as any good coach does. But as I always just remind myself to act in a way that I want, that's respectful, and communicate in a way that's respectful. So when you are saying the right things, you never have to wonder if what you said was right or wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Because often it's like I said the right thing to people, but I said it in the wrong way. And then in the end, I'm still wrong for it.
Right.
It's still wrong because like you may have said what was came from a good place, but it's how you communicated with them, which was wrong, you know, and now you're at fault. Now you're wrong for that. So as long as I stay true to those values, then I never have to question myself in the end. I never have to wonder like what was my wrongdoing in that situation. Or was the client overreacting when I said, you know, they need to be better, you know, were they, you know, was it right the way I communicated it? What I said right or wrong? You never have to wonder those things when your communication gets better.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever experienced having to tell a client not to compete because of a reason other than their current physical state, meaning psychological, whether it was body dysmorphia, depression, or anything along those lines?
Yeah, and I think these are things that, again, it comes with experience. You know, you see the full cycle of something, you know, and when you understand the full cycle of something in life, it gives you a lot of confidence, right? Like we know the real estate bubble. It's like every 10 years, the stock market, it goes up and it's a bubble and then it crashes. And then that crash leaves a bit more room for growth. So we know what the cycle looks like. And people that have never been through like a recession or a stock market crash or a real estate crash, they're like scared right now. But people that have been through the high and the low, they understand it and they're like, it's no big deal. It's going to crash and it's going to come back again. And, you know, I understand what the landscape looks like. And the same is true for coaching people. It's like I've coached people through a whole process and a whole cycle and all types of people to understand what it looks like. So I know where that person is and how it's going to end with them. You know, is it going to end on bad terms? Is it going to end on good terms? Like, what does that relationship look like? And I know that because of the history of cycles of personalities and people. So, you know, I've got to the point where now I can say to people like, this is not a good fit, because I'd rather it end that way instead of it ending in a way where it's like, well, like I'm the bad guy, or, you know, they're just not in a good headspace in the end of it all. And it just turns into something more than it needs to be. You know, having said that, I also got better at pre-qualifying people as well. So I don't even work with that type of person. And I think that comes with a lot of time and experience as well of doing anything. It's like now I kind of don't attract certain people because they don't get to that point in my process. They don't get to that point in working with me where they are even working with me for me to know that. I know before even working with someone that they're not going to be a good fit.
Would you
Do
say
you
then,
have
for example, sorry, go ahead, Umbro.
do you have any just to kind of build on what you were saying, Amer, do you have any sort of screening process when deciding to work with a specific client or athlete?
Yeah, I think something interesting that you said, man, which was like, you made some very good points about, you know, the guy in your gym that was saying he kind of wants to do it or he's going to see how he looks in 2 weeks. And, you know, I would take on those people before. And, you know, any coach likes helping people, you know, any coach that we know, I don't think anyone coaches and doesn't like helping people. I think every coach in the industry to varying degrees likes helping people. So we want to believe that we can help everyone, you know, and that's the nature of a coach typically. So like I would always say yes to certain people, like, yes, I can help them, or I want to, or I feel bad, or whatever the case may be. But as you said with that guy, it's kind of like I can hear their language, and I know that they're just not at that point for me where I want to work with them. You know, I'm not a coach that's going to take you from like the ABCs, you know, and teach you like, okay, here's how you diet, here's how you do these things, here's how you count your macros, like here's how, like, I need you to push harder on the cardio. I kind of got past that point in my work where I don't even want to do that kind of work. So, you know, I'm actually not even a good coach for that type of person. You know, like if you come to me and you want me to teach you that, I'm not even going to be a good coach for you. You're going to get more out of someone else. So I don't want you to have a bad experience working with me because I didn't give you what you need. And that's all relationships are. It's expectations of what people need. And I can't meet that expectation for a lot of people. So now I work with people that are more of like, they're very self-sufficient. They know how to diet. They've done shows before. Like I'm not the coach for people, for the most part, working with people that have just only done one show, you know, their first show or never done a show before.
And it circles back to just being completely honest with yourself and with the client. Like if you truly believe that you cannot help them. You're very comfortable with just saying that. But I think the problem with perhaps some coaches, specifically the new ones, is that they encounter these moral dilemmas very often. This is unfortunate. And I think it is potentially a combination of things. They don't have the experience. They don't know where this situation may lead. And also, if they really need that coaching fee, they really need the money because they're just starting, right? So it's a very, once you start to develop your client base, once you start to really know yourself and your abilities and limitations as a coach, then you're a lot more comfortable in saying, you know what, I'm sorry, this is not, whether it's a very specific demographics, whether they have an underlying health issue that you just don't feel comfortable, you don't want to screw them over, you're very comfortable with saying, you know what, this is beyond my scope of practice. I just wouldn't feel comfortable leading you in this particular case.
That's an excellent point, man. I think a lot of it, and it's not even like an insult to people. It's like a lot of times coaches take on people specifically for the money because they want the money too, right? And I experienced this in my business with employees, and thankfully we don't have that problem anymore, but we would have employees that would take on people, but they weren't even good coaches for these people. So as a result of that, like these people would get shit service or wouldn't get the results they wanted, and they'd leave unhappy. Thankfully we're in a position now where we have less employees, but they're all very focused on a specific scope of practice. Like they're good at one thing, and now they'll be like, okay, you take this one, you take that one. But that only really happens when you have coaches that are busy, and that have work, and they're not dying for work. And so it's like, you guys know Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And it's like, you can't reach a point of self-actualization in life where you can help people if you're still fighting the lower tiers of the hierarchy. If you're still like trying to put food on your table, well, then the priority will never fully be helping someone else, because you're always trying to provide shelter or food or physiology, like for yourself. And so you have to get past that point in order for you to really be very successful and like reach a point of mastery where you can help other people, where it's like, I don't need to worry about putting food on the table. I don't need to worry about, putting a shelter or roof over my head. I don't have self-esteem issues. So like now, and that happened before when we had, for example, employees that are competing against like some of our clients. It's like, so now you eliminate all those things and you have people that are at a higher level in their thinking, and they're actually able to help people to the best they can.
Mm-hmm. And this relates back, I think, to even competitors as well. Like when they don't have those basic tiers from that level of hierarchy, as you were mentioning, they're not going to be able to do the things for that highest level of self-actualization if they are still very concerned with the tiers below, whether it's you don't have enough to sustain yourself, whether it is that you really care about what other people are thinking about you, and little things like that. It just relates to basically everything, if you really think about it, when it comes to really getting to the highest self that you can achieve.
Everywhere in life. And I think, that's probably why people don't necessarily like someone like Phil Heath, for example. They don't understand his way of thinking. They don't understand his level of confidence or belief in himself. And people think like it's, oh man, like he's like
he's too cocky.
Yeah, they don't relate to it. But it's like, I think from what I gather, I think he's lived a life where he never really suffered, in terms of like money and things like that. Like I think he comes from a good family, so he kind of had those tools, and like a lot of people in this industry don't, unfortunately. Like they might not have both parents in their life. They might not come from a family that has money. So it's like a lot of us were fighting those battles, and then you have a guy like that he's already has all those tools. He's like, fuck, I'm just focused on being the best bodybuilder I can. I don't need to worry about food. I don't need to worry about love. I don't need to worry about, self-esteem. Like I have all these things fulfilled. And now I can just focus on the one thing that makes me great.
Which is why I think a lot of people identify with Kai Green even more than Phil Heath, right? Kai Green's story is amazing, and he didn't have any of these things, right? And, I think that's what made that battle of number one between those two so interesting, because
he represents the
like, yeah, exactly. He was a people's champ, and more people I think could identify with his story rather than with Phil Heath's, right? But the reality is, though, in this sport, you need those financial resources to be able to become as good as you potentially can, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Amer, I'm curious. I know you have a very strong stance on COVID and the situation that our country's in right now, and just business in general and business that have been forced to close. Um, can you give me some perspective on maybe perhaps some advice or just thoughts you want to share with people in terms of the past year and how things have gone for whether it's a business owner or just people in general with mental health?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously it's unfortunate. I think, I'm not of the belief that COVID's fake. I'm not one of those people that think it doesn't exist. I do believe it's real. Um, I do believe that, a lot of the government restrictions are unlawful and that, they just don't make sense. And I did get very caught up in it for a while in terms of like, I have strong beliefs, but I always find myself in life when I get to a point where I'm complaining and nothing changes, I need to make change. I hate hearing myself say the same things over and over and we're in the same circumstance. So I saw that people were not going to make changes. Businesses were not just going to go out and open. So I'm not going to keep on advocating for something where people aren't going to make changes in their life. That's just not, it's a waste of time. What I do think though, evolution is a very real thing in life. It's what got us to where we are. And I think humans were so complacent and we don't like change. We love certainty. So we've reached like this point in evolution where we want to remain where we are because it's so great. Like we have a wonderful life, like everything is nice. Like we have internet, we have like phones, like we have everything we can, at the tip of our fingers. And we're trying to fight evolution almost as well. Like we are going to evolve. Governments are going to evolve. Like the way our societies are built are going to evolve. That's just the law of nature. That's the law of of being a human being. And I think sometimes when you fight things too much, you almost miss out on what's ahead, because you're looking to try to stay the same. And, the most successful people are the ones that can adopt new ideas or adopt things very quickly and not be stuck in old ways. That's one of the key characteristics that makes a genius is their ability to quickly pivot and focus on something new or take a new idea or ideology and let go of their old one, even if they've held on to that old one for so long. Whereas average people, they can't let go of their old ideology because they're like, oh, that's what I've known my whole life. I don't want to let go of that, even if the new one is better. And that's what separates a genius from other people, one of the main things. So I think that, you have to always, like any successful person, any happy person, it's like you focus on what you choose to focus on grows, and I'm not going to sit online and complain and cry about it. Like, I don't do that. I focus on the tools in front of me, whatever's in front of me, and to make the most of it. If that means that like we become a communist country and like everyone's the same, well, like I'm just going to try to be the best amongst the same, and that's my goal. And use the tools I have and continuously work to be better. Having said that, I also believe that there's more opportunity right now to level up than there ever was. And there's more opportunity, so to speak, to level down in life for a lot of people, and if you miss that train one way or the other, you're too late. And I think you have to take advantage of what's in front of you. More people are on the internet. More people are hiring online coaches. Like, I don't think personal training will ever be the same. I think it will be there, just will never be the same. I think gyms will never be the same as what they once were. So like the world changes. That's evolution. And we just have to go with it and look for the opportunities. One of the most famous quotes, and I forget who said it, is like, never waste a good crisis, which is, like in every pain, in every challenge and adversity in life, there's something to gain from it. Unfortunately, the majority of people are not looking at what they can gain from things. They're looking at what they're losing.
Yeah, I think when it came to last year, a lot of people, and coaches specifically too, they almost fell under this mentality of, well, the gyms are closed, no one's gonna want to work out, let's just sit back and ride it out somehow. Where in reality, there was an opportunity still. There were still some people that wanted to keep with their workouts. They wanted to keep as healthy as possible. So in my own experience, I heard a lot of people saying, man, we're really suffering when it comes to the business. And I'm talking about online coaching.
Mm-hmm.
And luckily, that just wasn't the case for me. It's just, actually, it was a more successful year than the 2019 and the year prior. And it's just kind of relating back to what you're saying. You have to really, if there's an opportunity, if you see, because the opportunity there was to perhaps remodel some parts of your business to address this change. But if you're not the type of person that is comfortable with change, you're just going to sit back and just wait it out and wait for the people that are comfortable with change to take over, perhaps a little bit of market share, right?
Man, I love that because I see it from the outside in terms of your business. I can see that you guys did level up, and I see a lot of leveling up is just your mindset and your perspective on things. And I think like you guys like really got to the next level in your business just over this last year, and it's a true testament to your thinking and your perspective on life. And I know a lot of coaches that leveled down big time. Their businesses shrunk and they lost all their clients because they were so fixated on like, oh, shows are going to come back the way they were, like things are going to come back the way they were. 90% of our business is lifestyle. It's not even competition prep, and the first thing I told our employees was this: if you guys think that the gym's closing is a bad thing, like everything is your perspective in life. If you think the gym's closing are a bad thing for business, it's actually one of the best things, because what is the responsibility of a coach? It's to help people, it's to guide them, it's to educate them, it's to give them the tools. Well, like now people are at home and they don't know how to get in shape. There's one more obstacle in their way, which means it's one more opportunity for you to sell people on coaching because they need you more than ever.
Absolutely.
People can go to the gym and just wing it. You can just get on some machines, do whatever. But like when you're at home, you can't just really wing it. Now you need like more precise guidance. You need more specific advice. You need, more tailored programming. So everything can be an opportunity depending on how you see it. And obviously you guys, your business is leveled up, and I'm not surprised just speaking to you, man.
Thank you very much, man. I appreciate that. And it's very interesting what you mentioned, because even in this messed up situation, what I was telling a lot of clients was, this could actually be a blessing in disguise, because with a lot of people, even girls, but especially guys, when you go to a gym, there's a lot of ego happening, man. You just want to lift the heaviest weights and pick up the heaviest dumbbells or whatever. And in most cases, that's not really what's best for their physique. They're potentially putting themselves at risk of injury, and they're not really connecting with the muscle. So what I ended up trying to emphasize through this whole process is, you don't have as much weight. So you don't have, first of all, you're at home. You have no one to impress. No, it's just you and your music. That's it. So pick up even bands, like just slow it down as low as possible. Trying to connect with that muscle as much as you can, because that's something that you're likely not going to do at the gym, because you have these shiny toys and all these options and opportunities and machines available for you to just max out on or whatever. Once you take that out of the equation, you're just completely alone. It really makes you also realize whether you're actually doing it for yourself, or whether you're actually doing it to impress people, take videos, post them, whatever. So I think that was a defining moment. And some of these clients, actually, once the gyms opened back, they started to make some progress, but a lot of this progress was due to the fact that they were forced, they had no option. They were forced to connect with the muscle. So when they went back to the gym, they were better prepared to use this fancy equipment.
Yeah, it took people back to level one, which was like learn how to contract a muscle. And people don't know that, because most people get in a machine and they're just like, okay, go. Whatever the machine tells them to do, like the machine tells you push up, that's the only way the machine goes, just push up. They kind of just, it's like a ride. They get on it and go,
Yeah.
But when you're at home, it's like you can't do that. You literally need to figure out how to create support. You literally need to be more mindful, how to create intent in your brain, and you're focused on contracting the muscle. I don't think people do that with machines nearly one bit. Two people can use the same machine and one person gets so much out of it and the other person doesn't. While you're doing band home chest workouts, you literally have to contract the muscle.
Yeah.
There's not enough load for you to like, for you to kind of get lost in the exercise, So in the gym, we're so focused on exercises, we're so focused on movements, but we're not focused on contractions, which is the root of movement and exercise.
Absolutely. Just because you see something from the outside happening up and down or whatever, doesn't mean that internally it's actually what it needs to happen, right?
You would really like a resistance training course called RTS, Resistance Training Specialist, actually. It's all about internal focus and internal performance versus like external and what it looks like. For anyone listening, you guys should check it out. It's called RTS, Resistance Training Specialist. It's taught by Tom Purvis in Oklahoma.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for the tip. Well, Amer, we know you're a very busy person. We don't want to take too much of your time. Byron, do you have anything you'd like to add or ask before we
I'm going to
finish?
be completely honest, man. I've been taking it. I've been sitting back and just taking it all in. It's actually been more of a learning experience than anything. But if I had one final question, I guess it'd probably be, more or less with Man the F Up, because I know that's headed by yourself, whereas Lady the F Up is headed by your sister, correct? Man the F Up, where would you like to see it in the next couple of years? I don't even know actually how many coaches you have besides Jay Stevens and Josh Cooper band. So I'm just
Yeah.
curious.
So Hammer Fitness was like the main brand. And then from Hammer Fitness we created Lady the F Up, because we want to be focused on one niche, and we realize like when you grow too big, sometimes you're not always growing the right way. Not all growth is good growth. So we grew not in the way I expected or wanted, and then you start to, your message gets distorted, and you don't end up getting the most out of what you're trying to do. So we created Lady the F Up. And then during the pandemic, we started Man the F Up. Jason and I did. Right now we have, I believe, 6 coaches working under Man the F Up. They're already at, 6 figures per month doing numbers like that. It's not even been a year for the company. The goal isn't honestly hiring more coaches. I used to think more is better, bigger is better, like more coaches, more employees. I realize it's all about quality. We want people that are busy. We want coaches that are very successful, that earn a good living, because that's a reflection typically of the work you do. There's a strong correlation between, when you earn more money doing something, you probably give more to that something. So when we have coaches that are doing well, instead of having a lot of coaches, then some of them are doing well and some aren't, we want all coaches to be very successful personally and financially, professionally, so that they can give more to this. Like Josh just quit his full-time job so that he can give more to this. As a result, he's going to make more money, but he's going to be giving better value to the client. And that's what we care about. It's always about giving the most amount of value. And I'm not one of these people that like has this like idea in my head of what my life is always going to look like, man. I just kind of like, I show up every day, and, the world may change as it did. And, I couldn't plan for this, and that's why I don't try to plan too far ahead either. But I do focus on the quality of what we do always, and the growth of what we do, and make sure that when we grow, it's growing upward and not outward.
Fair enough. Well, honestly, we appreciate you taking the time. We're really excited to share this with everybody else. Is there anything you'd like to say closing this out here, Amer? Would you like to give a shout out to any of your coaches or companies that you have?
Sure, yeah. I mean, you guys can follow us on all our social media: Man the F Up, Lady the F Up, Hammer Fitness, or my own Instagram, Amer the Hammer. I just appreciate the opportunity. I appreciate you guys having me, and I know that you guys share a very positive, optimistic mindset, and I think that's it's important. It's important we have people like you guys, and have people that are optimistic and positive and encouraging, and looking for trying to figure out ways to empower yourselves and other people in life. That's what life really is about. It's about leveling up, and teaching people to level up along the way with you, and you guys are doing a great job of that, so I appreciate you having me.
Thank you very much, sir. This has been very insightful for me as well. Thank you for your time, and I don't know, maybe in the future we can get to sit down again and have another chat. Maybe once maybe the world will be a completely different place in a year from now or 6 months from now. So I would definitely like to sit down and talk again with you.
Sure, I would love to. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Have a great day. See ya.